Welcome to our compilation video concerning the value of flame retardant containing materials. Through a series of audience questions and answers from subject matter experts, you will learn much about the value of flame retardant containing materials and how they play an important role in fire safety. Now, without further ado, let's get right to the first question.
Hey Zoe, how do flame retardants work to prevent fires?
There are 3 ingredients required for a fire to start and continue burning. First, there's fuel, a material that burns. Then heat, which increases the temperature of the material to support the fire. And finally, air containing sufficient oxygen. Firefighters know that to extinguish a fire, at least one ingredient must be removed. Take away fuel, no fire. Remove the heat, no fire. Or, starve the fire of oxygen, the fire dies. My friend Ethan, a fire scientist, will now explain how flame retardant containing materials play an important role in fire safety.
Yes, flame retardant materials play a critical role in fire prevention and fire control. These materials can prevent ignition, so a fire doesn't even start in the first place. If a fire does start, flame retardant materials slow fire and can give occupants additional time to escape. This is important because a 2020 Underwriters Laboratory study estimated that occupants have less than 3 minutes to safely escape a modern home fire. And finally, flame retardants lower the amount of heat released by the materials. Experts state that this is the most critical factor affecting fire growth and severity. If heat release can be slowed, escape time is prolonged.
Why are flame retardants used for fire protection?
To protect life and property, engineers have cleverly designed different layers of fire protection. Passive fire protection often includes items such as fire-rated walls, floors, doors, and flame retardant containing materials that can help prevent the start of a fire. These systems provide protection every minute of every day, even if, let's say, the water pipes freeze or the electricity goes out. Most people are more familiar with the second layer called active fire protection. Examples include smoke alarms, sprinklers, and fire extinguishers, which only get activated after a fire starts. According to a recent National Fire Protection Association study, there are still almost 500,000 structure fires in America annually. That's a crazy statistic for sure, since this means that there is almost one fire every minute of every day.
What are some examples of flame retardant containing materials providing passive fire protection during daily life?
There are 5 broad categories I will list for you, and then give you an example or so for each. Buildings. Fire stop materials are used at small openings to help keep people safe from the spread of fire and smoke. Furnishings. In public occupancy buildings, draperies are made of fire retardant textiles. Transportation example. The United States FAA has done a tremendous job over 5 decades to improve the fire safety of aircraft interiors, including floors, walls, seating, and bins. Billions of passengers each year benefit from this passive fire protection. Electrical. Flame retardant plastics are used in circuit breakers to safeguard against ignition and fire spread. And finally, electronics. Passive protection by flame retardant-based materials in circuit boards provide protection if an electrical short or overheating occurs in appliances or computers. Always remember, if ignition of a material can be prevented in the first place, then there is no fire.
For fire safety needs, it seems like the terms regulations, codes, and standards are used interchangeably. Do these all mean the same thing?
They do sort of sound the same, Felix, but are actually different. Fire regulations are mandated by federal and local governments. They are the law, while fire codes are a set of rules, typically developed by industry or nonprofit organizations that are sometimes adopted by government. Finally, standards such as fire test methods provide very specific technical detail on how to implement a regulation or code.
I understand there are hundreds of different fire test requirements pertaining to buildings, furnishings, transportation, and electronics. This is very confusing, Ethan. Why are there so many test methods?
First, Let's consider a product we're all familiar with: mattresses. Did you know that the typical North American sleeps approximately 2,500 hours per year? Many people don't realize that if a mattress is somehow ignited, it can create a life-threatening situation in the entire house within a few minutes. According to a 2020 U.S. government report by NIST, existing federal mattress flammability standards are successful in preventing greater than 65 American deaths per year. Fire risk scenarios can be simple or complex. For instance, the federal fire test requirement for mattresses in a recreational vehicle consists of exposure to just a small flame. The experts have reasoned that occupants should be able to readily escape an RV fire in a timely manner due to less safety risk. In a residential structure, the test requirement becomes more stringent, since escape from upper floors might not be so simple. At a prison facility, a mattress fire could endanger the lives of many people. The hurdle to pass a prison mattress flammability test is another step higher. And the U.S. Navy has a very robust mattress flammability requirement, because a ship loaded with explosive materials in the middle of an ocean could present significant risk for sailors. Lastly, accidental ignition of a sleeper seat on a plane cruising at 30,000 feet could be catastrophic. The US FAA has therefore imposed very rigorous flammability requirements to protect lives on planes. So in summary, Adriana, more fire safety risk leads to more stringent regulations and testing requirements.
Ethan will provide a historical perspective on the contributions of flame retardant containing materials for residential structures.
During the mid-1970s, the United States had the highest fire death rate of all industrialized nations, at 55 deaths per million people. It was noted that 84% of these deaths occurred in residential structures. U.S. government agencies decided to tackle this problem. A committee of distinguished polymer and fire technology scholars was appointed by the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. These experts wrote a 10-volume report concerning the fire aspects of polymeric materials. Volume 7 of the report stated, "The present United States situation, with thousands dying and tens of thousands seriously injured each year in building fires, is not acceptable at this point in our history." Some of the key recommendations by those experts back in the 1970s included improvement of materials by use of new ingredients, additives, or combinations, and materials innovation with ingredients like flame retardants continues to this day. Improvement in material test methods, including new test methods to address emerging fire risk scenarios. Greater use of automatic detection and suppression systems, which are very effective safety tools indeed. Upgrading building codes, which is especially important since ever-evolving synthetic materials may present new fire risks for both occupants and firefighters. And educating the public for improved awareness to further help prevent tragedy. Over the past 50 years, robust efforts were undertaken for improved fire safety in buildings. The good news is that structure fires decreased dramatically during this time period. As of 2020, fire deaths decreased by 70% compared to the base 1970s level. Implementation of the government experts' recommendations provided significant safety improvement, especially when one considers that plastic materials usage increased from 35 million tons to 460 million tons during the same time period.
We have now learned that passive fire protection by flame retardant containing materials within structures, furnishings, appliances, and electrical and electronic equipment have contributed to improved fire safety performance. Back in the 1970s, a government agency defined a serious problem which affected life and property. Through the concentrated efforts of government, academia, material scientists, fire safety professionals, and many others, significant improvements to fire safety have been achieved.
I thought flame retardants make a material fireproof, but things like appliances and houses still burn. Why bother using flame retardant materials in the first place?
Remember, flame retardant materials are designed to prevent ignition or retard fire growth, rather than make an item fireproof. The definition of retard is to delay or hold back in terms of progress, and flame retardants do just that. Let me show you a graph and give a few examples to clarify how flame retardant materials function and provide benefit during the course of a fire. This graph is showing time versus temperature. The further to the right, the more time that has passed. The further up, the hotter the fire. Prevent ignition. Ideally, flame retardants prevent a fire. For example, perhaps a lit cigarette accidentally lands on a hotel lobby carpet. Fortunately, the flame-resistant carpet only smolders and does not fully ignite. A fire is prevented in this situation because the floor covering is compliant with U.S. federal law and can resist the small amount of heat from the cigarette. Slow flame spread and lower heat release. In some cases, the energy source is hot enough to start a fire. For example, if a space heater tips over, shorts out, or gets too close to drapes, ignition might be more likely, as it is a much larger energy source versus a cigarette. In this case, even if a fire occurs, flame-retardant drapes or flooring materials can help slow flame spread and lower the overall amount of heat released from the fire. Prolong escape time. For the space heater example, flame retardants are activated and help slow flame spread and reduce the heat release or fire intensity. This gives people more time to escape, plus more time for fire services to respond. In fact, numerous studies have shown that flame retardant materials can add not just a few seconds, but multiple life-saving minutes for escape and response time. Delayed onset of flashover. As a fire grows and heat builds up, there is a risk of flashover. Life-threatening flashover happens when all the combustibles in a room are ignited by temperatures that reach greater than 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Flashover in our graph is shown by the sudden heat rise. In this case, the fire quickly becomes too big for flame retardants to further adequately control, just like when some fires become too big for even water to put out effectively. Flashover is not survivable, but the presence of flame retardant materials can increase the time to flashover. For these situations, every second counts. Fire penetration protection. In public facilities such as hotels, fire stop materials are used to seal small openings between rooms for utilities like piping and electrical work to keep people safe by slowing the spread of fire and smoke. Intumescent flame retardant coatings are often applied to steel to help prevent structures from extreme heat that might lead to building collapse. Such protective coatings have up to a 4-hour fire rating. A fully formed fire will continue to burn until it runs out of fuel, runs out of oxygen, or is cooled to a point where it can no longer propagate.
My apartment has furniture, a video game console, and appliances which may contain flame retardants. Does the government regulate such chemicals? Also, are all flame retardants in products a cause for health and environmental concerns?
Before responding, it is important to recognize that plastics do not typically work well by themselves. To meet performance requirements, commercial plastics often contain different functional additives and fillers. Flame retardants are used to resist ignition and to slow the fire if burning does start. Regulators from the US, Canada, Europe, and other regions assess the risk posed by chemicals. Ultimately, a chemical's risk is determined by analyzing the chemical hazard while factoring in potential human exposure. Regulatory action is taken when regulators deem the risk unacceptable to human health and the environment. Sometimes, limitations are imposed on the use of certain chemicals, while occasionally there is a complete phase-out of usage. A chemical that is determined to be a PBT is of special concern to regulators. PBT chemicals have all three of the following properties: persistent, remains in environment for a long time; bioaccumulative, builds up in organisms and the food chain; and toxic, harmful to the health of humans and/or other species. There are tens of thousands of chemicals used in commerce, while only a couple of hundred of these are considered flame retardants. Over the past 25 years, a small number of flame retardants have been identified as PBTs and restricted. Regulators continue to prioritize and assess all chemicals in commerce, including flame retardants. Of course, chemical producers play a role in bringing safe and sustainable products to market, and plastics formulators play a role in designing effective new materials. For example, it is important that chemicals added to plastics are compatible with the polymer, since incompatible substances might be more likely to migrate to the surface under conditions of use. Additionally, formulating with PBT chemicals must be avoided. In summary, a small number of flame retardant chemicals have been restricted by global regulators. Existing chemical regulations and information concerning flame retardants currently under risk evaluation are publicly available online. Information is also available to the public concerning third-party chemical hazard and alternatives assessments.
What resources are available to help manufacturers and other stakeholders determine safer flame retardant options for use in their applications?
Let me provide some background information and examples. There are several assessment tools and resources available for the public to use for comparing flame retardants and other chemicals. Some of these are free to access, while others are fee or subscription-based. In each case, the resources utilize chemical hazard data for their assessments, generated or compiled by industry, academia, nonprofits, and government. It is important to note that the comparative tool examples I will mention focus on the hazards of the pure flame retardant chemical rather than the hazards of the chemical contained in a final manufactured product. This is important because overall risk is defined as hazard times exposure. So, while hazard is an important aspect to consider, even a high-hazard chemical could be utilized with very little risk if there is no exposure. Let me provide 3 examples of third-party flame retardant hazard assessment resources available for your use today. The US EPA and their third-party experts have published hazard assessments for 70 different flame retardants. For each alternative assessment, a hazard profile rating was assigned for 15 different criteria related to human health, aquatic toxicity, or environmental fate. A second assessment methodology, green screen for safer chemicals, takes things a step further than the EPA approach. This tool uses a similar dataset approach, but assesses each hazard criteria to create a benchmark score on a scale of 1 to 4, while also adding a few additional criteria for ranking. Another, more recent chemical hazard assessment system has been created by the nonprofit ChemForward. In the ChemForward approach, an accredited toxicology firm is used to assess 24 human and environmental health endpoints across multiple exposure routes. The assessment of the hazards results in a rating that spans from A, a good grade, to F, a failing grade. Each of these resources has their own unique merits, and all can assist various stakeholders in comparing the health and environmental aspects of flame retardant chemicals to help determine possible safer materials for their applications.
How dangerous is the smoke to occupants and firefighters when a home structure and its contents burn?
In addition to heat, home fires produce smoke, which is a combination of airborne solid particles and gases. Smoke from a fire is a significant threat to human health and safety. Here are a few key facts about smoke toxicity. First, most fire victims don't die from flame exposure, but from the inhalation of smoke, carbon monoxide, and other toxic gases. A second point is that there are many diverse materials used to manufacture a home structure, and its contents will result in the release of thousands of even more diverse chemicals and toxic gases during a fire. Finally, firefighters have an additional concern, since they can be repeatedly exposed to smoke and soot during and even after a fire. Some toxic residues can attach to the protective gear and can be absorbed through the skin during handling of personal protective equipment.
Thank you, Ethan. Can you also discuss how the presence of flame retardants impact the overall smoke toxicity during the course of a fire?
You may recall that the purpose of flame retardants is to prevent ignition of an item in the first place. So, it is important to recognize that without ignition, there is no fire, almost no smoke, and toxicity concerns are minimized or eliminated. But even if a fire does start, studies show that flame retardants can slow flame spread and decrease a fire's intensity. This means that large amounts of toxic smoke can be prevented through the use of flame retardant materials. Without intervention, a fire can grow and flashover may occur. This happens when a fire's temperature becomes so high that all combustibles in a room ignite. At this point, the fire becomes too large for flame retardants to be effective in most applications. In a fully evolved fire, some flame retardants function to reduce the toxic smoke generation. Other flame retardants, although they function very effectively during the early fire stages, may increase the smoke content. And importantly, studies have shown that many flame retardants have a minimal or negligible effect on smoke generation. In sum, each of the dozens of flame retardants in common commercial use will degrade differently in a fire. Further studies are ongoing on this complex topic. Also, researchers continue to study health effects to firefighters from exposure to thousands of decomposition products that form from a fire, including flame retardants. These studies involve possible exposure pathways and absorption risks to firefighters before, during, and after suppressing structure fires. But remember that in residential homes, most materials are not flame retardant. Flame retardants are only used in select applications where fire safety experts have determined a greater fire risk. This means that when a home and its tons of contents burn, flame retardants represent only a small percentage of the total weight of all available combustible materials, and therefore, during a fire, can only degrade to form small percentages of the existing smoke. So, to sum it up, in a real-world fire, there is no such thing as safe smoke, and toxic smoke will be formed with or without the presence of flame retardants. Flame retardants neither universally increase nor decrease a home fire's overall toxicity.
In my research, I have seen a few instances when someone had stated that chemical flame retardants do not work. As a fire scientist, how will you respond to such a claim?
In this video series, we have helped others understand flame retardants. As documented within these videos, flame retardant materials are effective in preventing ignition, slowing flame spread, and lowering heat release. The science behind how and when flame retardants work is well researched and widely understood by fire scientists, polymer scientists, and materials professionals who have often spent their entire careers improving fire safety. However, it is quite easy for someone to make an assertion without any supporting evidence for their claim. So, in your research, when you see such an assertion, always remember to look for their evidence. As a fire scientist, I can unequivocally state that flame retardant materials are an important layer of fire protection that complement other important fire safety measures, like codes, standards, smoke detectors, fire alarms, sprinklers, and, of course, emergency responders. We've already spoken about assertion versus evidence, but let's take a few moments to think logically on this topic. First, witness this visual evidence showing the standard glow wire test that is conducted for the certification of plastics used in electrical appliances. The plastic sample on the left contains no flame retardants, while the sample on the right contains flame retardants at levels designed to protect the same plastic type against the heat from a 1400-degree glowing wire. This test simulates a real-world scenario where an electrical malfunction might cause an overheated wire or connector. Is there any doubt that the plastic with flame retardants outperforms the plastic without flame retardants? Second, flame retardants can prevent catastrophe. In fact, over the years, there are many instances where fire safety experts have indicated that lives have been saved through the use of flame retardants. Why would experts make these statements if they did not believe them to be true? Finally, why would manufacturers voluntarily spend extra money to use flame retardants if they serve no purpose? The logical answer is that global companies producing computers, appliances, airplanes, and other products would never add extra material costs if they were unnecessary. It would make no sense.
So, Ethan, are you saying flame retardants work 100% of the time?
No, of course not, Adriana. Flame retardant-containing materials don't prevent all fires, but they are effective in many cases. But if you really think about it, most things in our world are not 100% effective. For instance, society has laws in place, but there is still crime. And people use seatbelts, but people still die in car wrecks. Despite this, laws and seatbelts are still known benefits to society. Likewise, just because flame retardants do not work to prevent some fires does not mean that they do not prevent many other fires. You may have even experienced your own close calls with fire. Have you ever noticed a burning smell, or what might be called a near fire, from an electrical device or other item? For instance, plastics electrical cases that melt, smoke, char, or are scorched can provide evidence of a near fire that did not progress to form a large fire. Flame retardants can be a central reason a product failure does not grow into a large fire. So, as you can see, flame retardants play an important fire safety role in protecting human life and property.
Final chapter. A summary of key takeaway points.
Thanks for sharing this important information, Ethan. Can you wrap it up by providing some key takeaways on the value of flame retardant materials?
Sure, Zoe. Flammable and combustible materials are widely used in modern society and can present a fire risk. These materials are part of our everyday lives. Due to our learnings from past catastrophic events, society has created fire regulations, codes, and standards to address different fire risk scenarios to protect human health and property, and engineers have designed layers of fire protection, including the use of flame retardant materials that provide us with passive fire protection. Importantly, flame retardant materials play a key role in fire prevention and fire control by preventing ignition, slowing flame spread and lowering heat release, prolonging escape time, delaying onset of flashover, and providing fire penetration protection. It is a fact that over the past 50 years, U.S. structure fire deaths decreased by 70% due to implementation of active and passive fire protection. Due to the many diverse plastics and applications in commerce, there are a couple of hundred different chemicals available that provide a flame retardant function. Regulators evaluate these chemicals and apply risk management measures if they are necessary. The risk evaluations and third-party chemical hazard and alternatives assessments are publicly available. Also, as seen in this video compilation, in a real-world fire, there is no such thing as safe smoke, and toxic smoke will be formed with or without the presence of flame retardants. Finally, as a fire scientist, I can unequivocally state that flame retardant materials are an important layer of fire protection that complement other important fire safety measures, like codes, standards, smoke detectors, fire alarms, sprinklers, and emergency responders. Flame retardants are an effective part of the overall safety toolbox that protects human health and property from fire.
Many thanks to Ethan and all audience contributors. For additional information,